Hey, Terry Caliendo from Dedicated Managers here again, and in this video I'm gonna try and not sound so manic. I went and listened to the last video, and I do sound pretty manic. Just getting used to learning how to do these videos, and plus I'm doing them on the fly, so there's not a lot of time to practice. Again, I'm just trying to lay down, what I'm doing, so that if somebody wanted to come back and use this tool someday later, you might be able to figure some stuff out. So I don't expect this to be a complete training tutorial for somebody that's not fully up to speed. But and again, that's why I'm kind of so manic, is because I'm not really practicing or figuring out what I'm going to say before I say it. So I did want to show another cool thing that I just did. So in the last video, I showed the state change and how I was able to shrink up these lists and get them to look nice on the transition. And the computation that shows all this stuff. But the next thing I want to show is that, so this obviously appears, this menu system, this same thing appears here, and then if I say click into a child, that same thing appears here. So anytime we've got repetition, that's time to create some kind of, usually in coding, it's a function that does the repetition, but in here we're going to do a component that I'm going to pass the values into to make things easier. So if we look at my code now, if we go back to the primary kinship caregiver view, before where I had a long list, I'm now just passing in a component, this subentity list component. So I can actually, you can probably see it better in the diff file. This is that same file, primary caregiver.view. And that is what's displaying, that's what's displaying this whole view here. But what changed was this here. So let's take a look at that, darn it. Back in this view. So I got rid of the entire, this whole list that was doing all the work of laying it out, right? Here's my list group. Here's my toolbar title, right? My toolbar title that said kinship children. And then the list that was done below it. So if I show the right screen, this is the toolbar title, and then this is the list below it. So I got rid of, that's all red, so that means that's all gone, and it got replaced with this short little thing. And instead of looking up all these different things and figuring out where they all go, notice that kinship menu visibility is repeated all over the place. So if I was to copy this and paste it into one of those other places that I needed it, I'd have to go back and change all these variables, which would just be a pain. Instead, I just pass that variable one time, or whatever I need one time, to that sub-entity that I created. Now the visibility, that can actually be handled within the component itself, so I don't even have to pass that. And so each instance of this component, each instance of this component is going to have its own visibility. And so you can see here, here's the others in household that I got rid of and replaced again with that same entity. So now that we've seen what's gone and what's left, let's take a look at the regular file. So this is the diff file for primary relative caregiver. Now I'm going to go to the actual current file of it, and you can see that instead of a long, huge thing of code, I've now got a couple things. I've got this right here is the one panel, and then this is the other panel. So this is the kinship children panel, and this is the others in household panel. And so when I display it here, if I want to make a change, if I wanted to go and change all of these components, say I wanted this button to be red instead of green for some reason, I don't have to go and change it every single place. I can just go to my subentity list view, is what I'm calling here. I'll talk about that in a second. But I can just go to that view, and I can just make the color of the button, let's say, I think warning is a keyword here. And so now all of the buttons will be yellow. So I changed it in one place, and all my updates, or all my places, got changed. Now I haven't, in this view, I haven't updated this to the new module yet. This is still using the old code, so that's why the color didn't change there. But you can see that I've componentized or made this a component that So now I can control the look of everything all from one place, and that makes me a lot more efficient. So let's go back and talk about what I had to do that. And again, so I took all that other information that was in variables throughout various places and put them into this entity list that I'm going to call. So looking at the diff view file here again, this is the entity that I'm going to call, that new entity that I created. And here's the old code. So I had to pull all these variables, which repeat in various places. I just need to take them one time and send it through. Now again, of course I pointed to the visibility one, which is not passed through, but the others in household, that's actually a string that needs to get passed through. A good one to really pay attention to is probably the what I'm looping over. So I'm looping over the other in household computed variable. So I'm just going to pass that in right here as my entity list, and so that's what I'm going to loop over in the child entity, or the child component that I'm putting in. So this is the child component. So I just need to pass the various things that I was going around and changing in each place. If we look at the difference between the others in household and the one above it, the kinship children, everything, the structure is all the same. It's just the variables and the V model. Again, that's the thing that doesn't show up. But the the title. No, that's not a good one because that's computed from here. This variable, which is what's being looped over, the v4 is looping over the kinship children. So I got to pass that in. Whereas down here, actually, I'll just scroll down. So we look for that same thing down here, and I'm looping over the others in household. So I mean, all the code is repeated. It's just a few of the variables are changing, as well as which icon I'm using. Well, that didn't really change between these two, but I want to be able to change the icon and what the wording is with the add button. So this says add child, whereas this one says add other. So when I pass things in, I'm going to pass that button text as add other or as add child. But now this huge red area gets shrunk down to this green area. And so if we look, I also had to add a file. So this is the file that's now being called, and it's better to look at the code view. So I'll go back to the code. And so here's the primary kinship caregiver. These are the two sub-entity calls that I'm making, 1, 2. One is for the add child, and the other is for the add other. And again, if we go back to the screen, here's the add child, so that's this one, and add other, that's this one. Here we are back in the code. So there's the two that I'm calling. So where does this sub-entity list come from? Well, that's a component that I'm calling. So it's going to be down in my components section. This defines, that component, that the tag that I put in there, sub-entity-list, sub-entity-list. That defines the component tag. And then this is where I get that from. This is the variable I'm importing sub-entity list from components shared sub-entity list, which is in my shared folder here. It's just a file that I created, so I can click on that, which is going to bring me to it. And so basically I took all that other code that was repetitive and I just put it in one place, and now I pass in those variables that I'm passing in, entity list, base URL, toolbar title. If I go back to kinship caregiver, that is, sorry, it's up here, right? Entity list, base URL. This add URL actually should be deleted because I combined those into one. Little mistake there. I can fix it. I don't need that anymore because they were repetitive. They were the same. This was basically the same as this with the word add, so I just dropped that and put the add functionality, the add in the sub-entity list. Anyway, so we're passing these props With a colon before it, that's a variable. I'm passing a variable. If there's no colon before it, then I'm just passing a text string. And then those things will land wherever they need to in the child file. So the the button text, which shows up with, that was the the add child or add other, that shows up right here through the add button text, which is what I pass right here, the add button text, which is different between these two. So I took all that big stuff and I shrunk it down, and now the control of the look of all this is held in this single file, so that if, like I said, if I wanted to change that one button color, I could change it everywhere with one simple word change or phrase change or whatever it is. One simple change of a piece of code. And I could, I could make this a variable too that I pass in if I wanted them to be able to have different button colors. And maybe I'll end up doing that if I need to. But for right now, that's a static thing that's the same between all of them, just like the header between all of them, or the toolbar color. The toolbar color between all of them is blue right now. And so when I change it here, it'll change everywhere. And that's controlled by this, right? So if I change this from blue to red and saved it, now it's going to change in all the components with one simple change. So hopefully that was helpful, help you understand, making your code more simple, simplifying your code so that you don't have as much work to do when you go and change things. And then these cards I can just have show up everywhere, and I can make my code shrunk smaller in a lot of places so that I can really see what's going on. And if I wanted to reorder, if I wanted the others in household to come first, I'm just highlighting this little snippet. I'm just highlighting this little snippet and moving it up here. And now it's going to show up above. My spacing isn't going to work out, but you can see others in household is now on top of kinship children. So rather than having to, before, I would have had to have gone and grabbed, wrong file, I would have to have gone and grabbed this entire piece of red code and moved it below this entire piece of red code. And you really can't tell what you're working with because they look so much alike. It's a lot easier to work with these smaller snippets, and I can just easily see that I'm working with add child or kinship children. I should probably even move this variable to the top to make it really stand out that's what I'm working with. So again, Terry Caliendo, Dedicated Managers. Hope you took that, got a little bit of pearl of wisdom from that. I think I was pretty manic again. I tried not to be, but I was. But hopefully it was understandable. Hopefully you learned something. Again, leave a comment, contact me, whatever you need to do, whatever makes you feel good, do that. Again, Terry Caliendo, Dedicated Managers, happy coding, signing off. Have a great day.